Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 57. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who still likes, shares, comments on the show. Your ratings are super important for whatever the algorithm is to help get this in more people's hands and more people's ears. So this helps us a lot to continue to highlight the expert level guests and the individuals that we bring on the strength game. And just like that with our guest today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Sampson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room buildouts from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Sampson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Sampson as their top resource for all their professional weight room solutions because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and are the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out SampsonEquipment.com to see how Sampson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Shane Sutherland. Shane is a track and field coach as well as teacher at Walhalla High School in South Carolina. Prior to Walhalla, Sutherland previously served as both the track and field as well as cross-country coach and teacher at Stratford High School in South Carolina. From 2002 to 2019, he not only led both teams on the field and in the classroom as an economics, history, and geography teacher, but also ran the strength training program for all the off-season teams in the fall. Sutherland got his start throwing himself as a member of the Charleston Southern University track and field team. He was a 2-time all-conference athlete in the weight throw, and he was honored as a member of Big South Conference men indoor track and field all-decade team. From the collegiate ring, he transitioned to Scottish Highland Games, first starting in 2001. And since his inception in the sport, he's competed in over 200 games, both nationally and internationally, in both multiple classes, going pro in 2017. He's held multiple world records that has earned such accolades as finishing second at the 2021 Masters World Championship, amateur North American champion in 2016, 4-time captain of Team South, captain of Team USA in 2014, and East Coast champ in 2013. Now, following his professional career, he looks to continue competing in the lightweight masters division. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Shane Sutherland. What's going on, everybody? Today, I'm excited. I have Shane Sutherland on the podcast. He's in the beautiful rural area back at home. And I'm excited to have you on today, man, and chop it up a little bit. This is the second time we've actually got to work this. So I'm really stoked to kind of get you on and talk to you a little bit more. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well.
Hey, so I really want to roll right into it. We got the chance to meet at a Highland Games, and hopefully we get to throw again together. But really, like, before we get into all the questions that I've got for you, how did you actually get your first start, like, in the strength game and lifting, kind of leading to a professional Highland Games career as an athlete?
Well, I mean, first off, just like most people, I was a high school athlete. I landed up trying out for baseball, didn't make it, and I found the weight room that spring/summer, and fell in love with some track and field stuff. And I had a phenomenal high school weight room coach that kind of directed me, kept me motivated, and that was my start, was high school, track and field, and the weight room.
I know. And then from there, I mean, you threw in college. You started getting introduced to Highland Games. You talk a little bit how that actually came about, because most people don't really realize it's a sport until like now it's a little bit less fringe than it used to be. But as a track athlete, did you know about it in Highland Games, or when did you really first start throwing?
So ironically, my first season, or I shouldn't say my first season, my senior season of track, I had a buddy who was not a thrower, who happened to go to a local Highland Games and tell me all about it and how I missed out that weekend on throwing a sledgehammer and, throwing a rock and turning the caber and all this stuff. And, I was the thrower of the two of us. And I was like, man, I missed it. And then it never came back. It was one of those things like we never mentioned it again, but I had heard about it. So when I came to college, I was on a pretty nice team. I had a good group of guys around me, and one of my best friends, who was a college football player, he said, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And this was the week of 9/11, 2001, because most sporting events were canceled, including his college football game. And I was like, well, I don't know, hanging out. And he's like, well, you want to go throw some rocks? And so we ended up going to the Charleston Highland Games, which was, one of the first sporting events / festivals, whatever you want to call it, to kind of happen after 9/11. And we found ourselves very much not in place. I had a baseball cap on backwards. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Didn't know you had to wear a kilt. Didn't know that there were always rules. And the rock was fine. That was the shot put. I had a vast experience in that. A little heavier, a little awkward, but I did just fine. And then we threw the 56, which is not anything. I mean, there's some variance within track and field, but it was not something I understood how to throw. And Charleston is a cut games, which means your top 10 athletes after those two events move on to the rest of the day. And lo and behold, I threw the stone far enough to balance out that horrific 56, and I made the cut, and I threw the rest of the day, which was not something I could imagine the crowd wants to see. I'm no-heighted in both height events. I dropped the caber 3 times. I didn't understand. I couldn't move my feet in the hammer. It was, not exactly my best experience from a throwing perspective, but man, I fell in love with it. And then, of course, college coach found out about it and said, nope, not until you're done. So it was, the following year we snuck out and did another one. And then I graduated and I could do as much as I wanted to. So that's how I got introduced to the games.
That's awesome. That's it's definitely a unique way to kind of get your first taste of it. I mean, having some throwing background, obviously, like everybody is pretty good at the shot. Like the hammer kind of equates a little bit. I mean, just some of the rotational aspect of it, but yeah, there's no preparing for the caber. There's no preparing for that stupid 56-pound weight. So, I mean,
which ironically, if you look back, and I looked back every once in a while, I think I threw like 15 feet in that 56. There's no way I should have made that cut, but I had such a good mark in the stone that it balanced out, which allowed me to then get to play the rest of the day. I think if I'd walked away with the cut, I might not have thrown the rest on other games, just because I wouldn't have had those experiences. I mean, something should be said about the level of guys I was throwing with. I mean, I threw with some guys who all ended up professionally later on in their careers, so it was a good introduction. So.
Yeah, and you were none the wiser too to like who you were actually throwing against.
No idea.
Knowing if it was rookies or like maybe before someone else threw, if 15 feet is like a good mark or not.
No, and I mean, like when you think about it, I mean, if you had given me that and just told me to throw it, I wouldn't have known what was good and what wasn't good. But there's a guy who, he announces now actually at the Loch Norman Highland Games, and he was a professional for years and years and years, Larry Brock, and ended up winning that day. And Larry was a guy who I threw against on Saturdays in college. I mean, he threw for App State. And so I knew Larry was a good thrower, but in Highland Games, he was, millions of feet better than me, it felt like. So
that's awesome. I remember my first games, I got a little bit of practice leading up to it. So, and I was just trying to shove as much video and footage and stuff into my head because I didn't throw at all until I threw my first Highland game. So I was kind of on the other spectrum. Everything I thought in practice was really good until I got there. And I was like, you only get 3 attempts at this. This is terrible.
Yeah. And I think that 3 attempt thing sounds great until you below the first one, below the second one, and then say, oh my God, all the pressure's on the third one, when in reality, what are you not doing? Like when you walk away from it that day, that first time doing it, it's like, okay, I got 3 attempts at this. I got some experience. And that's how we have to see it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to look at it too. I mean, you get to put it all on the line for those 3 and see what kind of happens. And I mean, those 3 are pressure cookers that you normally don't get in practice. You can train all you want, but you're not in front of a crowd. The lines are probably not even painted on the ground, wherever you're throwing, somewhere random or in a parking lot. So it's just a lot different when you actually get to put it against someone else, like on.
And that's something now, obviously, much later on in my career, 21 years later, I am the direct opposite. I rise to that occasion. If you come to my practice, I've got 2 cones put out, and one is a reasonable competitive throw, and the one closest to me is the bare minimum of what I expect myself to be able to do. And I'm trying to just put every throw in between that range. And on Saturday or Sunday, depending upon what day I get to compete, that's when I'm going all out. And, I think that's just the vast experience of, getting those reps in that are quality reps versus reps in that I'm going for it. Well, then your feet are all over the place. You're fouling, you're dipping with your shoulder, whatever it might be that causes those issues. Just hitting the technique, which at this point, if I went hard every day anyways, I'd be in trouble. So,
Right. No, I mean, from your first games experience, obviously, like you said, like having some shot put experience in you and then getting your hands on the rock, that average between that and having no idea what to do with the 56.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's what the games is, because it's 9 events where you actually have a balance between the 2. So even if someone comes out and is a monster at hammers and they're last place and everything else, you're going to finish last. You have to have a good average of all those.
Usually you're, and I think you've experienced this probably too. If you throw in an open class, not a lightweight class like we both threw in together in Florida, you throw in an open class and you might have that guy who's a power lifter, great deadlift. Well, that's going to translate really well to that height event, standing height event. Where the shot put guys are going to have that advantage in the first part of the day. Maybe not the 56 or the 42, but that stone and that lightweight. And then the hammer background, yes, somewhat, but our hammer is so different in that you really are using a different technique. Now, if you're an elite level hammer thrower, you can get away with a lot of mistakes. I'm going to put myself not in that category. I'm kind of that step down. I threw well in college, but I was never an elite. I never had a national qualifying mark in the hammer and like that. And so me throwing it wrong for years has cost me so much in the Highland Games because I wanted to throw it the same way I'd already threw it. I'm comfortable. I can hit this all the time. I hit this all the time. Well, now as a lightweight, I've had to say, okay, I can't throw it the way I threw it before, and I'm having to learn how to throw it legitimately. So,
right. That's great. I think that's great advice too for like people that get really gung ho in the very beginning and they want to throw. And like you said, like getting quality reps, a lot of people want to throw and just get as much as possible, go as hard and go as fast as possible. But I mean, that's good advice for someone who threw in high school, threw in college, like a completely different hammer, which is a different style. And you worked on the technique of it, but then you get to Highland Games, it's a completely different hammer. And you have to backtrack so much because you learned it a certain way. I think the same goes to say for like rookies and like kind of new people that are getting involved in the sport. Like if you do a lot of detrimental damage to your technique in the beginning because you're really trying to just push the pace, put the strength, push the tempo, like you're doing yourself a disservice, like in the longevity and like the technique of it, because it's kind of a beautiful blend between speed, strength, and technique. And 100%. You really don't need to be good, like super good at one of those qualities because you have to be balancing all of them over 9 events.
Yeah. Even when I was at my highest body weight, my highest level professional Highland Games athlete, no one ever said, man, Shane, he's so strong. It was, look how fast he is. Look his technique. That's what it comes down to is how fast can I move through those positions and stay in those positions? And then am I able to exert the force I need in order to lift it at the finish or complete the throw at the finish? Yeah, might it help me to have another 100 pounds on my bench press? Sure. But if it's going to slow me down, I'm going to rely on that and not use my technique getting across in our case, the trig. that's going to be a problem, you know? So when I think about throwing, it is that combination. You want to have the ability to move with strength, with power, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to touch on it later, because obviously a big change that you've kind of undergone that you've alluded to that people won't know right away is, and I remember at Florida meeting you for the first time at those games, guys are like, what, like Shane is half the man of Shane what he was, because you threw professional at a completely different body weight and you've cut down to be in the lightweight class. I want to touch on that later, because I think you made a really good point. Like, you threw in high school, you threw in college, and then you've been throwing Highland Games for over 21 years. And you talked about like the quality of reps, the type of training and things like that. Like, do you have any advice for anybody? Like, how have you been able to like really sustain throwing at a competitive level for this stretch and period of time?
Well, I think number one is you got to listen to yourself. Like, your body is 100% going to tell you where you're at. You know, like whether that be, lifting, throwing, whatever it might be, if you've got something, you've got to listen to it so that you don't make it worse. I've been lucky in my career. I'll be honest. I've had my fair share of scares. In 2007, I had a motorcycle accident where my lower leg was destroyed. And I've been able to come back from that, which, very lucky. I had a good surgeon, good timing, all those kind of things. I was young enough still to make that bounce back. But I also had, Highland Games injuries, whether it be, kind of tweaking a knee or, an elbow or shoulder, whatever it might be. But I've been lucky enough to avoid those serious injuries. And I think part of that is I've been trained by a guy who writes my programs. And I'll be honest with you, about probably 2004, 2005, I realized I'm not the guy to write my programs. And I give that advice to anybody to listen. Don't write your own programs. And I think part of that is because I enjoy doing certain things in the weight room, just like the rest of us, but it's not maybe what's best for me. And so Mike, the guy who writes my programs, does a phenomenal job of keeping everything. We're balancing everything out. We're worrying about what injuries might be this month or this week or this. I'm getting a lot of personal work with that, but also like he understands my history of subluxing my shoulders, or he understands my history of the leg. But we do a good job of balancing all that out and keeping everything from reaching that point. And I think we also vary enough. We change things enough. So I do enough variations of everything. So yeah, I might be pressing every program, but it's at a different angle or a different, grip or whatever it might be. That we are constantly changing, but constantly making progress. I think that's a big part of it. And I think the biggest thing is keeping in mind I'm a thrower. That's the hardest thing for people to do in that weight room. Like if, let's say, for example, we talked about it before, like coming down off the body weight and whatnot. I really kind of redid my squat for performance. Like I wanted to make sure my squat was going to keep. And so I really kind of reset that. And I squatted 300 pounds for the first time, 315 for the first time, about 2 weeks ago. And now that's not a lot, but it is a lot in the sense of what I was trying to get to positionally, tempo, all those things. And of course, as soon as I did it, I could probably do 325. I could probably do 330. That's pretty easy right now. No, you're a thrower right now. Stay on the plan. And does it help you to throw any further for that 10 more pounds? And the answer is not right now. Like the goal is, and I'll be honest, but like most athletes, I have a strength goal, but I also have a throwing goal. And if I'm hurting myself and I can't throw the competitions I get to go to, what's the point? So I got to stay within myself. And that's something I've always done. I've always been smart enough to listen to my body, train with the intent of injury prevention, and also put myself in a position to say, back off, you're a thrower first. Because if you don't show up and throw, and I've only missed one competition in my entire career. Okay. I sign up, for 21 years, I've signed up for games and went to games. I've missed one. And the only reason I missed it was my mom had open heart surgery. And so I'm going to show up and I'm going to throw. If I sign up for it, I'm going to show up and I'm going to throw, which means I'm going to make sure that I'm not hurting myself, either going out too much and throwing or going to the weight room and doing things I shouldn't do. So I've been lucky with that. Now, maybe that cost me some of the distances that I may have thrown if I'd been a little bit stronger, but I got to throw. And that was the point. I'm a thrower first. So nice. I think those are probably the reasons why I've been successful for so long.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, most of the people that would probably take that different route were not sitting there, like we're not talking to each other, because we would have never met, because you probably wouldn't have been throwing as long as you have, and you would have either had to hang it up because of injury or just lack of will to want to throw, like just being stuck from just monotony of things as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge point, and it's a testament to people that who compete as long as they do, especially in the same sport or change sports too, to be able to actually like figure out new ways to do it and always keep the bottom line the bottom line. If that's the sport you're trying to excel in, everything else you're doing is supplementary too. It's general physical training, it's preparedness for being a thrower. So keeping that in the back of your mind all the time is super important. I would completely agree.
It goes back to that, and I tell my athletes all the time. It's like, okay, I know that you're chasing this number in the weight room. I know that you're chasing them, because I'm dealing with high school boys. That first one is that 225 in the bench press. Well, that's great. How slow did it go up? Well, what do you mean? Well, did you grind it, or did you just get it, or did you just hit it and you could have done a second one? And to me, it's that speed of that bar, because grinding out that bench, whatever it might be, is not going to help me throw a shot further in high school, or stone for us, or whatever it might be. So it's what's the goal of what we're doing. Everything needs to be geared towards what it is we're doing. I mean, if you've got a goal of going to state for my kids in the shot, or going to state in the discus, or whatever it might be, then we got to focus on getting you explosive. Not, hey, look, you hit this number. Not quite the same thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I preach that the same with my college athletes too. I mean, we do similar exercises all the time. And I mean, you'll do the same thing throwing or playing lacrosse or playing basketball. Like, just because you take a shot from here, just because you take an attempt to throw here, like, what is the intent of what you're working on? Like, is it about being in the right positions? Is it about speed of movement? Is it about accuracy? Like, what are you actually doing? Because there's only a finite number of tools you can use before you start getting real stupid in the woods about and losing focus inside of what you're trying to improve on. So if you do the same thing and you kind of narrow what your tools are and just change the intent of what it is, then you can start to kind of perfect the things that really need to be addressed, more so than all the flash bang stuff that I get stuck in the woods with. Hey, so we kind of alluded to it, and I wanted to go back to this because this is kind of life-changing. It's a lot different for you, and still to be able to throw after a huge body weight change like that you've undergone. Like, obviously I did not know you at that time. I've seen pictures of everything. I've heard enough stories when we were throwing together, and even at some other competitions after, about like big Shane versus lightweight Shane. So what kind of caused you to want to drop down to like the lightweight class for everybody is under 200 pounds? And what has been kind of like the biggest difference in throwing and maybe just like athletic like experience for you now from your previous weight?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first part, why? There came a point, obviously, where everybody talks about mass moves mass, and everybody talks about those kind of things, and I can't disagree. My 56 was over 40 feet consistently when I was at 285 to 290 pounds, and I was so unathletic. And I think that was, I'd always been an athlete. I always considered myself an athlete. I may have been a thrower, but I was an athlete. And athletic me was probably more comfortable at, say, 225 to 250. That's a big range, I know, but when I was in college, I'd go home for the summer and I'd work 3 jobs, and I'd come back and I'd be 225. And then coach would be like, let's get back on that eating plan and let's get back up to being big. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, like, early season I struggled, and then by the end of outdoor season, I was back to where I was previous years and whatnot. And then, as adulthood hits, you make your own goals. And my goal was, okay, I want to throw this games and this games and this games, and I want to go pro. Well, the only way to do that is to be bigger. And you just can counter the weight so much better. But for me, there came a point where I had plantar fasciitis, and I had knee problems, and my back was bothering me, and I couldn't sleep. And I'm sure my wife would tell you I snored a lot more when I was bigger. So yeah, I think that there's just this calling for, okay, sanity, like, you're over 40, you're starting to hit this point. Now, granted, there are guys who are going to do that, and that's fine. And I never felt unathletic until that plantar fasciitis. That thing just made me feel like I was an old man. I mean, literally an old man. And so I said, okay. And I looked at Justin Blatnick at the Charleston Highland Games, and I said, next time you see me, I'll be 250. Well, that was 2019 November. And of course, nobody saw each other for 2020. So, and I happened to move houses. I moved to the country, and I bought a bunch of property. And, well, I virtually worked, which turned into, okay, I got a project here and a project there, and I got this project, and I got that project. And I built a perimeter fence around my acreage, and I did that all by hand, no machines. It meant I was carrying, concrete bags and posts and fence and everything else through the woods. And I was suddenly 240 pounds, suddenly 230 pounds, suddenly 225 pounds. And then suddenly it was like, okay, whatever. And I was pretty much done with throwing. And it's not that I was done with throwing, like I'm done. It was like, oh, there's no games. There's nothing going on. I still wanted to train. So I just kind of changed my focus a bit to train a little bit more. Hey, let's start over. I hadn't had what I believe to be a good off season in a long time, because if you know anything about amateur Highland Games / professional Highland Games, especially when you're close enough to Florida, you're talking about January, February, all the way through November. And what's your off season? December? And all you want to do that first month when you're done competing is recover. And so I never really felt like I had an off season. So I was like, well, what better time than now to have an off season? So that's why I said I was going to rebuild everything. So I started that squat down to, lower than I'd ever gone before, full range of motion, trying to be, a good tempo, trying to come out of that hole with, some authority, not getting slow. Just did a lot of things like that. Worked on a lot of body weight exercises and just made myself move. Now, there's some other things that are involved in that. One, I live in the middle of nowhere. So fast food restaurants are no longer a thing. Whereas where I worked before, it was 4 miles to work and I had my choice of every single fast food restaurant there was. So it was nothing for me to have 3 or 4 meals at a fast food restaurant. Chick-fil-A knew my order by heart. That's not a good thing. So that made a big difference. I eat a lot of, home cooked meals now, which is a big difference for me. So that kind of started me. Then I'm near Clemson University, so I had some former athletes that went to Clemson. And one of them asked me if I would train him for the Highland Games. And so he'd come over to my house, and I got enough area to kind of throw some of the events. And so I trained him. And then it was like, hey, wait a minute. I only need to lose like 20 more pounds and I could be a lightweight. I'll tell you what, we'll do our first games together and I'll try and throw as a lightweight. Well, I didn't make it. I was 215. And I was like, all right, whatever. And then it was like, all right, we'll creep our way down a little bit. And so I targeted another games. And I said, if I can be down at 205 at that games, I'll be happy. And I did. And okay, well, not 200 yet. And so last summer I went home to Connecticut to see my mom and sister. And I got down to under 200 and threw a games, Round Hill Highland Games as my first under 200 games. And it was shocking how bad I was, in my opinion. It was the most inconsistent I'd ever been in my life. It was like one throw was really good and one throw I'm falling down. And that was not something I was used to. But like you said, games reps are different. Games reps are intense. And so you kind of hit another gear. While throwing here at my house was not, it was like I was just going through the motions. So a little humbling, but in a good way. And that kind of sparked it for me again. Like it wasn't, I wasn't that interested really until hey, this is a challenge. And that's who I am as a person. This is a challenge. So if you put that bar up and say, okay, you can't hit it. Okay, now we're there. I gotta hit that now. I gotta get that. And so that was the big draw for me as being a lightweight. Now it's ironic because to me, the body weight thing was always I was always fighting to kind of be big in that pro class. I was never a big guy in the pro class. I mean, if you've ever seen a pro class in Highland Games, they were all big dudes. And I was never the tallest, never the biggest, certainly never the strongest. Where now it's like, hey, we are all 200 pounds, guys. And if you're not 200 pounds, what are you doing here? Go ahead and gain the weight. You can. So it's kind of a neat experience to have everybody be the same. I call it the same class, same weight class, because we're all the same weight. There's no extra brownie points for being 189. So, throw 200. So the goal every time I go into a games is no less than 2 pounds. So I'm trying to be 198 on game day. And that gives me enough of a leeway that I'm under for sure. And that I'm close enough that I can feel like I'm can counter the weights. And that's actually, for me, it took almost a year. It's not quite June yet, which would have been a year for my first games, but I finally feel like I'm caught up to the timing, caught up to the consistency, which I did not have the first year, or maybe it's 8 months or 6 months, whatever you want to call it. So, but it was a challenge, and that was the big part. And I enjoy it. Like, I enjoy the challenge. And it adds something to the games experience too, to know, man, I need to actually pay attention to what I'm eating before the games. I need to pay attention to like my water intake. It makes me feel more of a professional athlete, if you will. It's kind of interesting that it's like that. But I mean, game day as a pro was just show up and go after it. Now it's like there's like a week long of like, okay, well, I've got to make sure that I call it behaving. I don't call it like dieting, because at this point I don't diet. I know what I'm at. I know where I'm at. I know where I need to be. I walk around every day at 205 pounds. If I'm over that, it's a big day of eating. If I'm under that, it's like, man, I probably need to take a little more in. So that last week is just behavior. And then it's, okay, where am I at on Friday morning? Oh, crap. Or, okay. And I say, oh, crap. We're talking 202 versus 201 or 202 flat on that Friday morning. So it's not that difficult, which, interesting enough, if you'd asked me that 2 years ago as a heavyweight, I've been like, there's no way. It's so difficult not to eat or not to, go too much to Chick-fil-A.
That's awesome. That's completely different. And it's a huge life change. One, I mean, it's a huge change, like just athletically too, to be able to change. I mean, I want to talk to you a little bit about like kind of the changes that you went through, but I mean, it really hits home, like all the lightweight stuff, like you talk about, because it's nothing against the professionals, and those guys are what they are. I mean, they're monsters though, when you really see a true pro class.
Yep.
And I mean, when you're saying you were 285 and you had a lot of throwing experience, that's cool. Like Spencer Tyler's like 330. What is he?
Yep. 300 plus.
Dan McKinnon, like 350, 360, 6'6". I don't know.
This year at Celtic Classic, I don't know if the Celtic Classic is the North American Championships or American Championships or something like that. Never was good enough to get invited to that. But Wes Kaiser, who's a good friend of mine, he sent me a text the night before, because they do a Friday night event and then there's a Saturday event. And he said, I'm the oldest and smallest guy here, and Wes is huge. I mean, and Wes is taller than me. He's bigger than me. He's stronger than me. And I'm like, well, good luck there, buddy. Because it was Colin Dunbar and it was, Lily and, those guys. And it was just like, good luck, Wes. Have fun, man. Welcome to my world. I've always was smaller than everybody else. But, and that's the thing is, like, we've reached a point where Highland Games is, like you mentioned before, less fringe. We are getting those top quality athletes. My last year as an amateur, if you just went back 5 years, I might have won the pro classes overall. My last year as an amateur. And I was like on the fence, should I go pro or not? And I think part of the reason why, you could get me down the road here if you'd like. Our system in America is wrong when it comes to pros. It's nice if you're a good pro, because you can get a lot of games, you can get invited. But the Scottish model is where it's at. And that's kind of like, you show up, and if you're good enough, you make money. And if you're not good enough, then you don't. And here in America, it's like, well, you have to be invited. And the only way to get invited is to do this, 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 and this. And let's just face it, like, unless you're in that top 10, really, you're not going to get invited across the country. Otherwise, you got to do a lot of, I don't say brown nosing, but that's the right term, maybe. It's networking. And that's what it is. I get it. I landed up with, I think, my highest pro class season. I probably had 7 games, which wasn't enough. I mean, I say, well, not enough. It's exactly what you were talking about before. I didn't have those competition reps. I mean, you're throwing once a month, because, I mean, again, the Southeast, you're spread out between January all the way through till November. Well, 7 games, it could be a month and a half between games. And the hammer is timing. The hammer is 100% timing. I mean, the weights are timing. So unless I'm going out to that practice field and really getting after it and having somebody watch my feet, I might not get enough reps, true reps. And if I miss a throw, like I had a fouled throw that wasn't a foul and the AD wouldn't overturn it, and that probably cost me 2 more games, not because of that games, but because I would have finished 2-3 places higher. And that 2 places higher means I win a pro class. And now I've won a pro class. I can put that on my resume. So our system is flawed unless you are in that top class. And so, like, for me, going pro was 1, a goal. So that was kind of nice. But 2, I'd also reached that age where I was close to 40. and I could start doing masters games at the same time to kind of get those reps in, which is what I needed. Now, little did I know that 42 is not a 56, and that will change up your timing. And if you don't get enough reps with both, you're going to be in some trouble. So, but that's a whole road you could take me down, and I can get really detailed on that one. But I think it's better to just leave that alone. I don't need to be invited to pro games anymore. Have fun, pro class. But I definitely enjoyed it. And part of the reason I wanted to go was because the guys who were throwing the pro class were the guys I came up with. I looked over and there's the guys who I grew up coming through the games with, and then I look at the A class and I'm like, these guys are all 22 years old. Like, I don't know any of these guys. So let me go join my buddies over here. And it was nice. I got, my hobby paid for a 5-year period, which was nice.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll save some of the, I know some of those conversations. We'll save some of those for the field next time too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely different. It's a unique way, obviously, because it's still pretty much, even the pro class is kind of still amateurism. I mean, it's a unique sport, so it's really trying to self-fund yourself. But I mean, I just thought of that when you were talking about it, like when you're only throwing 7 pro games and some of the big game name guys are throwing like 25 in a year.
Yep.
The other difference is most people are so spread out, and yeah, it's one great thing to be able to throw whenever you want, or even have as much land as you do to go in your backyard and throw whenever. You don't have any coach. You don't have a coach with you. You don't have any teammates with you. So the only time you get a true marked throw or any feedback or any inclination that it's a foul, besides like you filming it and it still gets objective, is in a games. So it becomes even that much more important to be constantly throwing, even if it is like just a smaller games too.
Yep. And we now with our pro class too, now it's also, and I know this is every sport now, but do I bring a large social media following? Do I, bring that, like, hey, to the field, like, hey, my video camera's going to be rolling. You'll get to see this and your names will be out there, and I'm helping sponsor the games, or there's a variety of things. And like I said, I will not trade that experience because I enjoyed it. But I maybe wish I'd gone a couple years earlier because I maybe would have been healthy for those seasons too. But at the same time, I'm glad I made the choice I did. I have truly enjoyed the games again, where it was not as much fun, like, to be that pro level. Like I said, when every throw counts, and something as simple as, did you walk out the back or did you walk out the side? And that's not an issue in Highland Games. Make a throw, count or not count. And it's like, okay, I can have some fun again. Now, granted, I'm a competitive individual. You've seen it, I can get frustrated at myself. I can get frustrated at whatever, but I'd much rather have it be, oh no, I missed out on an award or a medal or whatever it might be, as opposed to I missed out on this much money, this games, and this money in that games, and that money, this game. Because the way I did it for me was my games paid for the next games. That's what I'm saying. Like, my hobby was paid for. So like, if I could go to this games for $20 because it's around the corner from my house, which I had one in Charleston that was close to my house, and then I make enough money to pay for the next 2, now I'm, trying to make it so I can go to this games that's far away. And so, I used it to pay for itself. That's what I did. I mean, I didn't buy a boat, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And like I said, I got to throw with some really good guys who I had come up with, and it was a blast. And I don't fault anybody for the way in which they run their games. And that's the thing that makes the Highland Games is, if you run your games a certain way and people come to your games, that means you must run it the way they want it to. Like, I think about some of those games out in, like, the Southeast is notorious for not having 16-pound open stones. Like, you're going to throw a 20-pound rock here or a 28-pound rock there. Well, then you go to Portland. I mean, in Portland, you're throwing a 100-pound stone. Like, nobody's getting a leg up throwing a 100-pound stone. But there are also places you could go where there's a slope and you could get a nice hammer throw there. And if I can get it to Estes Park, I might be able to hit something big, and okay, you know what? Show and throw is the only way to make this as and if I want to fit my bill to fly to Colorado, throw at Estes Park so I can throw a hammer that gets me ranked high enough so that I can get in the Celtic Classic, I should be allowed to. But instead, I have to be invited by the AD, and I have to be in, and I'm just using Estes Park here, and there's plenty of places you can go to throw downhill. That's just the way Highland Games are. It's not, it's not track and field where there's a grade that you're allowed, and after that, nope, can't throw there. It's illegal. You have to put more sand in or more rock in or whatever Corey does. It's like I always tell my kids, it's a 400-meter track. Stop asking me if it's smaller. But Highland Games, hey, they tell me it's a 16-pound stone. I'm going to throw it. This past weekend, I threw a open stone at 16 pounds. No, it's 18. We all know it's 18. Like, don't pretend, like, it is what it is.
So, I think it's what makes it unique, though. That's what kind of
exactly.
Cool.
And I always tell people, like, the hard part is we're trying to compare each other nationally, when in reality, all that matters is those 10 guys or 12 guys or however many in your group on that day. Think about the caber we threw in Northeast Florida. You will never throw a lightweight division with that caber again. That thing was 110 pounds, 18 feet? I mean, the first student, I thought myself, we're going to throw a lightweight caber because we had, of course, the first event in the morning. No one ever throws caber first thing in the morning. No big deal. It'll be a lightweight caber, probably 90 pounds, 17 feet. It'll be no big deal. And I went over and pulled on it, and I was like, whose idea was this?
Yeah.
I got to wake up now.
Classes through that one that day?
Yeah.
The A's threw it. The Masters threw it. We threw it.
And the only ones to turn it were the two Super A's, really, because I think Charles Fay turned it, and one of the other guys who's a Super A, which is, that top-level class in amateur, and myself. And let's face it, I have a lot of experience with big cabers, so that was, it was challenging for me, especially, not having thrown anything that big for so long. But it was definitely an experience that you won't get anywhere else unless they're just crazy and want to throw a big caber for lightweights.
That was a terrible wake-up call.
That was a horrible first event. A horrible first event. Good morning. Here's something that weighs as much as you do. So.
Yeah, that was rough. No, but I think it's cool. Like, obviously, like, it is very unique, the sport and all the different places and how ones are run. Like, but it's cool because each one, like Portland, has something unique to it. Like,
right.
Each one tries to have something specific. But I think it's even cooler that you've thrown for so long, and then within all of it, you kind of got revamped and really just a big refresher where you challenge yourself in a different way. Like, even because pro class, like, by the time you got to that point, you were kind of burnt out, and your goals had shifted, and to be able to take a step back, like with COVID and everything, and kind of find your passion for it again and start to throw, and then join a lightweight class, like, that's cool to see it revamped. So the big question I had for you, because we kind of talked about it a little bit, and the way I framed it, I wanted it to be different, because a lot of the guys, like, in the bottom of the lightweight class were like, how do you throw now, knowing that you were hitting like 60 feet before and now you're only hitting 45? Like, doesn't that suck? I was like, for me, the question I really wanted to you is like, what was your mindset going into that, and how did you prevent yourself from really like, hey, I cannot throw 60 anymore because this is completely different body weight. This is completely different technique I have to use. Like, how did you really shift your mindset with all the changes that you had to make to your body, and knowing that you've done it before, but you can't do it the same way again?
Yeah. So, right off the bat, lower your expectations. I walked in day one. It's funny because Adrian Wilson and I are good friends. And in my first games that I went to at that 215-pound body weight, I said to her, I have low expectations. And the low expectations was, because you're still a competitive person. And so I looked at it like this. All right, so what are the marks to get into Masters World Championships as a 42-year-old last year, and under 200? And those were the marks I was shooting for that day. So if I could hit those, I'm competitive for who I am, age-wise, size-wise. Now, granted, I knew I was a little bit over the body weight, but those were the marks I was shooting for. And some of them came easy, and others did not. Like the wob was easy enough. The stone, because the years of experience was there. But still, you're talking about numbers that were well far below what I'd obviously thrown at large body weight. But it was a matter of, okay, I'm targeting these particular areas to try and qualify in. I didn't get the hammers. I don't think I got the hammers. For me, the hammer's always been the struggle event. Well, it was even more of a struggle because I hadn't done the work at this body weight to figure out how to counter it, to be in the right position. And that 22-pound ball actually pulled me off balance a lot. And I was like, okay, this is a different event now. That's why I had to learn to do it correctly. And so when I say lower your expectations, it was not, anyone else's expectations. For me, it was my expectations. Now, I do have to say that there is that ego with all of us where I had to say, okay, Shane, you're not going to be, oh no, Shane's in our group guy. That guy, And I told people this, stop thinking about me that way. I'm just a skinny guy in your group now who has, experience, but I'm no longer a, 55 foot, 42, thrower. I'm no longer a 70, 80 foot lightweight guy. I'm whoever shows up on the field today and just deal with it. And I had to do that myself before I could do it to anybody else. And so there was a little bit of humbling. I think that's important in that journey, was like, okay, because if it had been easy and I went right back to throwing the same way, I would be doing it. Like, I needed that humble. Now, as for how to throw these weights at this body weight, that was a conversation with myself. Like, you can't do it the way you did it before. I mean, I can tell you that first time trying to counter a 56 when I wasn't 280 pounds, nope, it pulled you right off the ground. And so learning to cast at the right height, learning to the timing. I had to learn to accelerate the weight in a different location than I had previously, so that it was already moving. So all I had to do was add a little bit to it at certain points. Certain events were like easier. Like I said, the years of experience throwing a shot. And I mean, I've coached enough of that it was also like directly like tied in. Okay, I've coached smaller throwers before, so I understood how to do that a little bit, which means I worry more about speed. Like, you got to worry about speed. So it was an interesting experience, but learning each event again. And there were certain events that really have not come all the way back yet. Like my sheaf, I think it's finally worked its way back. I didn't think that one would be one that would be truly affected, but man, was it affected. I mean, I was a guy who would come in at 30 feet with a 16-pound sheaf. And now it's like, okay, if I can hit 30, I've had a great day. And so, I mean, I spent all of last year, I think I cleared 30 once last year. And it was early when I was 215. And then as I kind of progressed the rest of the season, it was like 26, yay. And so I had to kind of get past that. And so finally, I'm feeling like my body is used to throwing at this body weight, that I'm able to counter it and time it right. But if I'm off, it's off. And I mean that, like, I think I went 43 at one games in the 42, and in the same games went 36. Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, it shouldn't be that far off. But if the timing is off, there's no recovery. Whereas when I was big, just drop that shoulder and heave it, and it's still going to go pretty far because it's having to counter that body weight. And like, that's one of those things where you learn as a new humble person. Okay, back to the drawing board. Let's go back there and take some more reps. And I'm lucky enough that I have a supportive spouse who lets me go throw on weekends, and I have people who want to go. Like, hey, can we go throw this weekend? That kid at Clemson, he kept me all winter throwing. Otherwise, I'd probably been like, I'm good. It's cold out. I don't need to throw. So
that's interesting, because like, if you think of it as a new athlete, you're really just kind of learning as you go, because as you get better, all of it is a new experience to you. Like, you've thrown farther, you've thrown faster, you dial in your technique. It's all kind of uncharted territory. For you, it's uncharted differently because you have similar experience in it, but you're kind of experiencing it in a different lens, just being at a different body weight. So you know what the roadmap consists of. You just have to take a different route to get to the same endpoint that you had before.
yeah, I'll say this too. Like, that's the kind of athlete I don't want. I know how to do it already. No, you don't. You know how to do it when you were big. Now we need to do it right for this body weight. Like, it's got to be a lot more. It's like when I'm sure you've experienced it many, 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 many times. For you, it's like when a kid comes in and his high school coach taught him how to power clean, and you're like, nope, that's not a power clean. Please stop. But I've been doing this for years. Okay, well, please stop. We're going to redo it. We're going to start all the way over and go from the bottom to the top and make it correct. That's what I was. I mean, I was literally that athlete that I didn't want to coach because, well, I know this should work. This should work. And if I had taken that attitude, I wouldn't be where I'm at in the lightweight division right now, because I would still be fighting myself trying to throw the old way. It's kind of like those hammers. If I had tried to do what I did as a big person, I would be really bad, like, because there's no way to generate that force. And so I had to learn to counter hips movement. And so I had to do the things that I didn't like doing as a heavyweight. I had to do lots and lots and lots of winds without throwing the hammer. I had to do lots and lots and lots and lots of body weight, not body weight, but body countering exercises. And so for me, now I have a better roadmap on how to coach those kids because I went through it. Because you'll get them, I'll get them in the future where they have an idea about what they need to do, and that's it. And that's so convincing them how to change it. Yeah, you've had success, and I've always said to kids sometimes you got to throw shorter to throw further, which means we got to change your technique, and it's going to be a couple days or a couple weeks of you not being where you want to be. But if you don't change, you're not going to throw the big throw you want to throw. You're not going to reach that goal. So we can keep throwing that standing throw, but we probably should learn to glide, or we probably should learn to spin, or we probably should learn to move. And actually I've been doing that this week during spring break. Spring break is usually the best time to get kids to make that transition because there's less kids at practice. There's less less, we're not fighting the sun going down. And so, at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, we can say, we're going to take 2 hours and we're going to work movement, and you're going to learn to move. And I don't care how far it goes. I had a girl yesterday go from 70 feet in the discus to 90 feet in the discus because she finally said, okay, I'm willing to give this a shot. And that's one of those things where it's like, you got to throw shorter to throw longer. And when she finally hit it, yeah, the first 20 were bad. They were probably 60. But when she finally hit the first one, it was like 85. She's like, oh. And then the next one, bad again. Next one, good. And then we, can we put a cone out at 90 feet? Sure, no problem. And then 3 in a row over it. Okay. Well, aren't you glad you're moving now? Yeah, sorry, coach. Yeah, exactly. So, but having gone through it on the other side, you understand it as but this has always worked for me. It's not going to work right now, and I think that it brings you as an athlete, obviously as a coach, but as an athlete, it brings you to a place where you go, okay, learn, which is what we're all here to do, right? I mean, the experience of learning. So,
yeah, I think you took it really well in stride. Like you're saying, if you hadn't been humble with the opportunity and like your chosen changes to drop down to the lightweight class, it would be completely different if you tried to fight it against it and just do all the things you were doing before. But being able to like take a step back, especially teaching athletes like delayed gratification, like, and understanding like you need to take a step back and learn things before you can really excel, because just the same as your career has been so long, you're trying to project it as much as possible. You're trying to show that there's a lot more potential than just try to get your best marks right away. And you kind of talked about it. Obviously, we haven't touched on it too much, but you're also a high school track and field coach and a teacher as well. Since we haven't got into that yet because we got deep in the Highland Games stuff, but what those kind of coincided at the same time, like both your teaching career and your coaching career, along with your Highland Games. So what really got you into like coaching, and what like specifically kind of directed you towards the high school route?
Well, I mean, like most kids, I went to college with I'm going to do a business degree, like not knowing what I want to do, but they were giving me money to go throw things. And so I'll go throw things and figure it out as I go. And so I went in, and my dad pushed me towards, and nothing wrong with this, by the way, I appreciate him for pushing me towards environmental management, which is a business management and environmental science degree. And then I hit chemistry, like 2 or 3, whatever level that was. And I think it's organic chemistry. And I was like, nope, not for me. So I said, okay, well, what can I do with the business side? Just keeping the business degree. And I liked economics a lot, but I just couldn't see myself in the business side of it. And so I just kind of dabbled every summer in different jobs, different careers. I worked at a nursery. I worked at, a warehouse. And one summer I worked as a camp director at a YMCA, and I got to teach all sorts of different things like canoeing or swimming or this or that. And I really enjoyed the aha moment, when kids got it, when they figured it out, like when it was like they didn't need me anymore, or they needed me, but not as much as they used to. And to me, that was like, okay, so what do I love? Like, what do I enjoy? And, I enjoyed social studies in high school an awful lot. I enjoyed my history classes in college, and I was like, well, let's get a history degree and let's be a teacher. And so I landed up triple majoring and economics, history, and education, and landed up luckily finding a school right near where I went to college as a place to student teach, and then ended up getting hired immediately as a teacher and an assistant track coach. And then oops, that guy left and you're suddenly the head coach and you have no idea what you're doing. And your experience is I'm lucky enough that I played in decathlon a little bit because I had a coach in college who was an All-American decathlete and he just loved the decathlon. So when I'd come back in those skinny Shane, summers of 225 or so, he'd let me play. And so I got a little dabble in every event, but let me tell you, I was not prepared to be a coach of all levels of track and field. And that was something someone had told me early on, like, hey, your best athletes will not be in the event that you're good at. So get ready to coach things that you are not used to. And I was like, all right. So, and he was right. My best athlete was a distance runner. Okay. But when you understand periodization, when you understanding that there are basically three things that you can really control in running, and it's strength, endurance, and speed, then you can coach it. It's just a matter of finding those right workouts that work, that don't hurt kids, that, allow you to kind of balance everything out. And so I've been lucky enough that I had some phenomenal assistant coaches that I got to learn from. One of my really good friends and a really good assistant coach I had was Scott Niasen, who was a 1980 Olympic trials steeplechaser. And he was my distance coach, and I learned so much from him, and I'm so blessed to have been around him for so long. And he put me in a great position to be able to, okay, you take them and I'll take the rest of the team. Because that's where it was. We were at that point at one point where it was like two of us for 100 boys and 100 girls. And how do you make that work? And so, the throwers were a secondary concept that, like, hey, you guys please go to the weight room with the football team. I'm going to ignore you during those times. I'm going to coach the sprinters. And when I'm doing the sprinters, then we come over here and throw these things over here. And then eventually I got enough of a staff that it was like, okay, I can spread myself out and I can go to certain areas. So by the time, my 19 years at that school, I had coached everything at some point. But I had enough of a staff that I was just the throws coach for the last 10 years, which was really nice. Always that was my love. Let's face it. You can tell by how I talk about Highland Games. It's the same thing. It was my love. But there's something to be said for respecting all the other parts of track and field. Understanding what a distance runner has to go through, understanding what a sprinter has to go through, understanding what a pole vaulter has to go through. I'll be honest, high school me was like, how come that guy gets to lay around all day on those pole vault mats? Well, because he has to do gymnastics in order to do something at the top of the pole. He's got to do, speed work so that he can run fast enough to bend that pole. He's got to do jumping work so that his penultimate step is correct. You begin to understand that track and field is human performance at its best. And you just say, okay, everybody here is working hard. It's just a matter of how, and like my throwers, they were in the morning at 7:30 in the weight room. This is the high school kids. They were in the morning at 7:30 in the weight room. Then they'd throw practice, till 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then repeat, And in the summer, I was lucky enough that I could have my distance runners run at 6:45 in the evening for cross country. My throwers and my sprinters would come in and lift with me. And then, the distance runners would come train and they'd go. It was a nice little flow. And so I was able to kind of plan it all out and structure it where we all got weight room time. We all got the things we needed to do done. And we were able to have a pretty good program for probably the last 15 years I was there. I felt like we had one of the best programs in the state. Maybe we didn't win the state championship because the way that works sometimes is talent on top of it, because you got to have those. In South Carolina, we don't do a team championship. So having four guys at 4:30 in the mile is nice, but they all, in order to score a point at the state meet, they all got to be under 4:20. So it's like, okay, well, I have a deep team and they're competitive, but they're not at that top level. And so, you could have a great relay team, but if they're not fast enough to make the points, then you just don't get them. So, but we were a perennial controlling, that level at region. We were competitive, and it was nice. I moved to the middle of nowhere, as I call it, but it's not really middle of nowhere. I'm in Coney County up here, and I coach at Walhalla High School now, and I've taken over a program that is very unique. Very small in comparison. I was used to getting 100 kids come out for, track, and now I've got 44 boys and they all walked on day one. I'm like, okay. And they're seventh graders to seniors, and some experienced, some not experienced. So this is year two. Pandemic year was kind of an interesting one last year. It was kind of like, I had kids tell me I would come out, but my parents won't let me. Okay, I'll come out next year. And they did. And so we've got 44 boys this year, and we're, moving forward. We're not quite where I'd like to be, but we get better every day. And that's the goal. I'm doing sprints, which is not my favorite area. I have a throws guy, which is nice. Actually threw against him in college. He was at Clemson University when we threw. And so it's nice to have that area taken care of. And I don't have to do pole vault, which is kind of nice because those kids, yeah, I always felt like I couldn't walk away because that was the dangerous event, but now I'm doing sprints. And so I'm training 4x1 and I'm training block work and I'm training my favorite event. Don't tell anybody, middle distance. I am in love with the 4 and the 8 right now. So, but that is what we do right now. I run the weight room in the morning for my kids. I opened it to anybody who wants it. I don't care if you're a baseball player or a tennis player or golf. I don't care, whatever. If you want to become the weight room, I'm there at 7:30. And I've got rehab kids right now. All I have is kids who have knee injuries from the football team. So, but we're doing upper body stuff and we're doing their rehab work, and the trainer lets me do it. So it works.
You're a busy man.
Well, I'm a workaholic and I enjoy it. So
no, that's awesome to hear. And it's kind of cool to see too, because I know when we had talked, like you were just starting off the new program, like, cause you had moved and everything, like to a new high school, but I completely blanked on how long you were at like your previous school. And
yeah,
it's super similar, like your coaching career, like at the high school, as the same as your athletic career in Highland Games as well,
yeah,
because you took something that you built and you built like in a bigger body weight, like to get to the professional level, to really excel at that. And then you took a big step back to join the lightweight class. And you did the same thing. Like you started from the bottom. I mean, 2 coaches for 100 athletes, pushing your favorite throwers off to the side to just go lift. And you built that up over 19 years only to move and take a step back and start it all over. I mean, it's a huge thing to do. And like, most people can't, I don't think, can do it, because you get real comfortable and just continuing to like keep the same trajectory. That's why people keep the same job. Just keep pushing forward, keep pushing forward. Like we'll figure out where the ceiling is, but you shifted your goal. You wanted to move, you shifted your goal for Highland Games, and you found a new kind of passion and kind of revitalized it to now start a new program. So I think it's awesome to hear.
yeah. I mean, and I'm lucky because, the place I was at, I mean, I joke about I get away with murder. I mean, as in like, I could really do some things there where, my AD and I were good friends, and I could call him up and be like, hey, can I do this? Can I put this in? Can I buy this piece of equipment? Whatever, whereas now it's like, I don't even know how to order equipment where I'm at. Like I got to talk to somebody else about who do I put this form into and who do I do this with? And that familiarity is something that, really, I mean, in my interview here, I mentioned, that I used to do Sunday runs with my cross country kids. And I was told under no circumstances are you doing Sunday runs here because it's a very religious area. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. So how do I get the mileage I need? Because kids are going to be, I like my cross-country programs are not high mileage programs. They're 40 to 45 miles a week, but still try and divide that by 6. You start to look at having much longer practices during the week, and, you can't spread that across and make it a little easier. I'm a big quality over quantity guy. Well, I'm not running junk miles just to get them in. So how do we do that? Well, okay, guys, well, we're not allowed to meet on Sundays, but, if you want to hit your mileage this week, you're going to put in 7 this weekend, or you got to put in 10 this weekend, and you got to talk to mom and dad about when that's appropriate. Whereas my previous place, it was like, okay, you're open the weight room, turn the alarm off, okay, because we'd run from the weight room, they'd come back and they'd lift. And I lifted Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at my old place with my cross country team. You want to hear something? That's an interesting conversation to have with an AD. You lifted with your cross country team? Yes, sir, I did. Because to me, their upper body gets neglected, so we need to make sure we balance it out. So. We had a good experience there, and it was hard, and I didn't plan on coaching when I first came here. It was kind of a secondary thing because they had track coaches, they had cross country coaches, and I said, I'll volunteer, and that way it's not, my responsibility or but of course you kind of get sucked in with the kids, you get sucked in with the program, and hey, can you take over this? Can you take over that? And at this point, I am an assistant in cross country, which is beautiful. I don't have any desire to be head coach, and I'm just the boys coach in track. The girls coach is actually over all the business side, so that's kind of nice. I don't have to worry about fundraising, and I'll just do the schedule. But this place is a little bit nicer facility than my previous one, so I actually have to host meets. Like I'm hosting a region championship, and I've hosted 3 regular season meets this year, so it's a little bit more involved that way. But it's okay. New challenges, as we mentioned before. I enjoy new challenges. So
there you go. Yeah, new challenges. I think the other thing too, I just remembered, which is cool to talk about, because I have these conversations with my athletes all the time, just because I think many of them don't I think a lot of the team sport athletes I get oftentimes never did track. I mean, the same goes for me. Like I didn't do track or field or to start throwing until I started going in the Highland Games. So I feel like a lot of people don't really understand or have an appreciation for the differences between the different events or the style of training and stuff like that. So I think that's awesome that like you got a chance to be able to coach all of them and kind of educate everybody on each of them, especially like with the decathletes. That's,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the perfect transition for a Highland Games person. I mean, obviously it's not running. Thank
Yeah.
God you don't have to run, but you have to be very good at a lot of disciplines. I mean, you
Right.
can't be the best, but you can't be the worst. So,
And you also have to be able to turn off, I just screwed up big time in that event. You have to be able to turn that off. Like when it comes to, the decathlon, if you have a bad score, yeah, your overall score is going to drop. But you could have 9 more events. So turn that off. Okay, the first event, you false started, the first event, you fell over, whatever. You can't focus on that. So, that's the same thing in Highland Games. Like I know going into a games that my hammers are going to probably keep me from being an easy victory. So that means I'm going to have to, focus on the other events and then do as best as I possibly can in the hammers. And I'll be honest, my career has been great, but if I had been a decent hammer thrower, I've been a totally different level. But instead, I was not a decent hammer thrower. And no matter what I worked on, it was bad until now. Now I had to learn to throw it right. And now I'm not saying I'm spectacular, but in the lightweight class, I'm competitive because I've figured out how to throw hammers right. Now, all you need to do now is gain 80 more pounds and get back to the pro class, right? So
maybe save that one for a different day.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think at this point, if I gain 80 pounds, I might be dead. So I very much enjoy being able to move. Like today, I'm timing 400s and I'm running across the track, and it's I'm yelling splits as I'm running. I couldn't have done that at 280. So
Right.
It's nice to be able to move and exercise and do other things. So I definitely have had some benefits to joining the lightweight class, which was never my true intention until it happened. In other areas, like I get to actually be, somewhat athletic and do other things. So, which is kind of interesting because like I never got a chance to run with my distance runners. Like my assistant coaches would run with the distance runners and they'd come back and tell me, hey, so-and-so's got this going on. You might want to take a look at their, their ankle, or this is, because they could see things while they run I couldn't see. Or they, overhear things that were being said. And so I was like, you know what? I can run with the cross country. I can't keep up with them, but I can go out and run with them. Hey, what are we guys doing for, what's our pace going to be? This kind of thing. And I can run opposite direction of them if they're running a loop, and I can, see them while they're running and do some things, which I never could have done at 280. And if I had, I would have plantar fasciitis probably a lot sooner. So the benefits are many. So I'm lucky.
That's awesome. Hey, so the one question I really wanted to ask you too, because obviously like a ton of experience as an athlete and different throwing aspects and everything like that. And I'm not going to get ageist on it, but you are a lot older than your seventh graders.
Yes.
Like you said too, for like being at a new school, how many beginning athletes are coming out and like first time track athletes and stuff like that. There's a huge range between a seventh grader, your age, your training experience, and their 0 or 1 year training experience like that. And since you played, like you've thrown professionally, you've done all these different things, like how have you been able to like kind of understand what is the right thing to say to a beginner and kind of coach them up, knowing that you have so much experience and so much knowledge and wherewithal to give them all the answers, but you don't want to flood them with too much information. You just want to keep it super basic. How do you kind of approach someone like that?
Well, the good news is that I've spent 20 some odd years coaching that kid. Granted, the language is maybe a little bit different, and the, like the outside influences for the kids, they're similar but different. But one of the things that I've got college coach buddies who they tell me about the kid they recruited, and he was number 1 in this or he was number 2 in that, and it's like, yeah, I get the same kid every year. I start off day 1 with the same kid every year. This thing's a little heavier than I thought it was. This is a shot put. It's not just throwing a ball. So, I mean, right away, there's tons of experience there where I know what's too much to give them and what's not enough to give them. And so, yeah, I mean, we start off with, it's not throwing a ball because you're going to tear your rotator cuff. We start off with how to hold it. We start off with those things. So I think that there is that vast experience, but I will say this, I mean, there is an age difference between a seventh grader and me. And so just being Coach Sutherland, who's, been around long enough to know that I am going to speak to them in a way that is using as little of my knowledge as possible. I mean that in terms of like terminology. So you try and relate it to sports that they already do know. All right. So like, hey, have you ever thrown a medicine ball in the weight room? Have you ever done a push pass in the weight room? Ever inbounds pass in basketball? That's the position of our hand when we're throwing a shot put. So we try and equate it to things that they do know, they have been coached with, what knowledge they already do have. Obviously there's lots of changes that have to happen from that point, but you take from what they do know and work towards what is your sport. And then there's, of course, there's like the discus, which is just so different than anything they've ever thrown before, hand position and things like that. So that usually takes a longer time, but you're still working from a grip to a throw. And that's going to take some kids a couple days and some kids a couple weeks. And one of my best discus throwers ever took like 3 weeks to figure out how to release the discus and was, getting ready to quit and then suddenly had a breakthrough. It's one of those things where it's like today I was talking to a young lady who is 4'5" and wants to hurdle. And it's like, okay, well, our goal is to 3-step in between the hurdles. Your goal is to just clear the hurdle. Like, let's get through that and we'll worry about the next hurdle. Because she's a seventh grader and I'll, hope that she's going to grow a little bit. She's going to be a hurdler. So you're coaching not just for, and I say this all the time to my kids, sometimes I'm coaching you for this year and sometimes I'm coaching you for the next 4 years. And I'm a big believer in everybody on my team will score a point for me at some point in the next 5 years. And so I'm coaching every single athlete on my team to be a point scorer at some point. I don't get to pick and choose who comes out. So I've got to take everyone that does come out and figure out how to get them to that region qualifying level, which means I got to figure out how to get them to score a point. And if that means switching events, if that means, convincing them to, hey, you don't have to run cross country because you love cross country, but it'll make this track workout a lot easier so that next year I can move you into the 400 where I know you can score as opposed to being a 200 runner who can't score, but you're afraid of the distance. So it's all about talking to them at their level and taking them from what they do know to what you know. And I think that's a lot easier said than done, but I think it's a lot of feel. I mean, it's a lot of feel at this point, 20 plus years of it. When they come out day one, I know they're all at that level. I know they know very little. And you would think they have the greatest resource. I had to go buy VHS tapes of my favorite throwers, and they took how many weeks to arrive in the mail after I sent $24.95 to, John Godina or, Brian Oldfield or whoever it was. They got YouTube, a couple clicks and you can look up shot put, a couple clicks and you can look up discus, and yet they've never seen it. I'm like, you came out for track and you want to throw, but you've never seen the throw. So I will say this, rainy days for us are very nice because we can just go in the classroom, we can sit and watch a YouTube video and be like, okay. And I'm a big fan of not showing them professionals because they get away with murder. They get away with especially the Olympic shot putters. It's like they have a 600-pound bench press. When they're out of position, they still could push this thing out 65 feet. So let's not compare ourselves. Let's compare ourselves to someone closer to us. Let's look at high school kids. Let's look at the top high school kids in the country. Let's look at, and I'll tell my male throwers this all the time. You want to learn technique, watch a female thrower because they don't have the upper body strength to get away with the things that you do. So let's watch a female's footwork because I guarantee you hers is going to be better than yours. And I've been lucky enough to have kids that have listened. I think part of that obviously is, and I don't go around telling people I throw, like other kids will say something like, hey, Coach Sutherland, throws this on the weekends. Have you seen him do this? Have you ever seen, of course, at this point, it's hard not to Google me. I shouldn't say it's hard to, I guess it's easy to find me on the Google is what I'm trying to say. And so once they Google it, then there's me throwing a caber and then they want to know more about it. And then it's like, wait a minute, you can throw a 22-pound rock further than I can throw this 8-pound ball. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you show me how to do that? Well, now obviously, I've got some street cred. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I'm lucky enough that the kids I've had, and that's one thing I'll always say is I'm blessed with good assistant coaches, but I'm also been blessed with good kids. Because if they're not good kids, they don't last very long. So.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's cool because like being able to actually go back and teach the fundamentals and teach the basics. I mean, that's where a lot of root of throwing and running and sprinting and jumping really comes back to. And if you have a poor foundation for any of those things in the very beginning, your potential to actually excel at any of those is completely
Yep.
thrown off
Yep.
track. So,
and that's why, like, right now, I've got a kid who comes to my weight room sessions in the morning who was, we kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but like the football player who learned to clean in football. And, I'm not criticizing any football coaches anywhere, because let me tell you, I have the luxury of having, a 1-to-5 ratio most of the time in my weight room, or, maybe 1-to-10 if I have a big group. I did it at my old school. I cannot imagine having a 1-to-25, 30, or 40, and then trying to teach power cleans. I just couldn't imagine it. I'd have to do something different, kind of like I did that first year where we rotated things and whatnot. But, so I took this one kid, and it was just like, he went, aha, like, I understand now how badly this was going before and how easy it is when I do this right. And, taking that opportunity to work with that kid one-on-one, and having that opportunity to go back, because of course, what does he do? He goes back and tells his friends, and then of course we can get more kids to come and do the right thing. And I volunteered, like wherever. I always tell kids, like, I'm a track coach at Walhalla, or I'm a cross country coach at Walhalla, but I'm a Walhalla coach, which means anything that's going to help our program, I will do. Like, they're all my teams now. It might not be my team as a coach, but I root for you guys. So if I can help in some way, shape, or form, come see me. Like, more than happy to cover it. That's why I said, like, my weight room is not exclusively track. Right now it is, because that's who comes. But if you want to send me a kid who's got an issue, I'll work with them. Well, like I said, I'm rehabbing all these football players, not because the football coaches have asked me, but because the kids have asked. Hey, can I come do this? Why? And as long as the trainer clears them, we can do it.
Yeah, I think those aha moments are really important. Obviously, like, kids are going to definitely be more apt to listen to other kids. So
Yep.
if someone else has already bought into it, or they kind of see the fruits of their labor, or something just finally clicks and they can flip the switch, that's where it starts to trickle, where more kids start to buy in. Or the same with like seeing, like, Googling you and you not like projecting what your experience is, or your accolades or your awards. Like, as soon as one kid does that, like, it spreads like wildfire. And now they're more interested, and they kind of understand. And I mean, if you put the two next to each other and you told them everything that you've ever done and why to listen to you, or if you just started coaching them and they kind of gave you the same back talk as before, but then a few weeks later they understood like where you were coming from, it's like, you're gonna get a longer payoff.
Yep. And a buy-in that is, they own it. They own that buy-in. Yeah. And that's the thing you always tell kids is, like, once you want it, I can't stop you, but you have to want it. Like, I mean, I've got a kid right now who's a jumper for me, who's like, he's there every day and he does all the things we ask him to do, but he's not bought in yet. And the moment he buys in, he's got a chance to win the high jump at region, but he hasn't bought in yet. So he's kind of giving it his half effort. And I'm like, dude, whenever you're ready, we're ready to take that next step. But it's up to you. I can't force you to do it. I can't crawl in there and make it happen. Like, you got to do it. And I'm a big believer in, that buy-in for kids, like that ability for them to say, I want this. And that's what happened with me. You go back all the way to our first question you asked me about high school. I always tell people I don't love winning. I hate losing. And that's been with me since I was a kid. And so I was ranked number 1 in the discus my junior year. I went into our region championship and I got second. And nope, that ain't happening again. And so I went to our track coach, who was my throws coach, who was a nice guy, and actually the guy who writes my program still. And I said, can we go to the weight room this summer? And he said, well, you going to show up? Because of course I ask that same question to kids all the time. And I said, yes, sir, I'll show up, I promise. And he said, okay, well, see you tomorrow morning at 7:30. And 7:30 in the morning, and a high school kid, oh my gosh, 7:30 in the morning. I was there. And the more I gave, the more he offered. And that's how I coach my kids to this day. Mike has been, an influence on me coaching wise, has been an influence on me as a man. And I think that came from my buy-in to him, and he isn't giving me as much as I was willing to take. And that goes from, still to this day. Like, hey, Mike, that program was great. We did X, Y, and Z on that program. What do you think about adding this? Or what do you think about tweaking that? Because I mean, obviously, I'm at this point now. I have enough experience that I can ask questions. Whereas high school kid, they was like, just give it to me, just give me all of it, and just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Now I want to know why, and he's been willing to offer those things for me. And so, like I said, I've been blessed with a lot of good assistant coaches, but people around me. I mean, you know this. You are the combination of all the things that you've ever got from all the people you've ever worked with, whether it be just your mentors or your coaches or even your teammates. If I hadn't had the experience that I had, I wouldn't be where I am, whether that be coaching or throwing, or lifting. I'll say this: those last 10 pounds, that 15 pounds, I said, Mike, man, I'd like to get down to that 200 mark. Well, where are you at body weight wise? I'm at 215. Okay, well, where's your body percentage? I don't know. So I went to my athletic trainer at my school here. She's very, very young. And she's like, well, I can do that for you. I'm like, okay, cool. And she does one spot with a caliper. And I'm like, I'm used to more than that. Can you do any other places? No, that's all I'm doing. Oh, okay. All right. So I knew it wasn't very accurate. And so I told Mike, I was like, oh, we got this number, but I wouldn't suggest it's very accurate. She only did one spot. And he's like, really? One spot? I was like, yeah. Okay. So, we kind of worked it out best we could. And I was like, I got the poundage to lose. And I don't think I'm gonna lose that much muscle. Let's just go ahead and do what we can do. So he wrote the normal lifting program. And then I got to do all the exercise, conditioning stuff, what I never wanted to do. Because my goal with this whole thing was when I got down there, I'm not doing any extra conditioning. Well, I ended up having to with that last part. Like I said, now it's all dialed in. I don't have to worry about it the week before. I just look at where I'm at and say, okay, how much work do I have to do on how clean do I have to eat? Basically, do I cut peanut butter and do I cut dairy? That's what it comes down to at this point. So, but Mike has been a very big influence on me in a lot of ways. And I've been lucky enough that he has been with me since the beginning. But if he hadn't been that way, I wouldn't be that way. And so those kids that have, lifted with me or trained with me are the same way. They buy in. So right now, I've got that kid who comes every morning at 7:30. And I got a couple who come here and there, but he comes every morning at 7:30. And if he asked me tomorrow and said, hey, can we do an extra session or can we do something extra? I'm gonna give it to him because he's earned it. So, that's the way it is.
It's great to have coaches like that or mentors or athletes or teammates or anything that really are bought into the process and are willing to give themselves, if first you're willing to actually earn it and want it more than them. Because I'll tell athletes that all the time. And it's kind of surprising at the college level how many kids what they say what they want, but their actions tell you a completely different story, or their parents really want it more for them, or they kind of got to college and they're burnt out. And
yep.
And I'll sit down with them truthfully, be like, do you actually want what you're saying? Because if you do, I need you to actually show me that effort. Otherwise, why are you doing this? Because this is 4 years. You could be somewhere different. You could not be on this team. You could be doing anything in the world. You chose to be here. So what do you want to get from this?
Yep. I mean, one of my famous quotes as Coach Sutherland at my old school. So I was lucky enough, like I said, I had 100 kids come out for track every year. So I ended up having to do cuts. And I'm not a big fan of cuts. What I was find a place for this kid. If we don't have a place, then we have to tell them, come back next year when you're older, bigger, stronger. Because there comes a certain point where we're just taking reps from other people. 100 on both sides, that's 200 kids on the track. You really aren't getting quality reps out of some people. And so the day after our cuts, I make everybody sit in the stands. And my statement was, now what? Now what? What do you want? If you don't have a goal in mind at this point, you can just go ahead and go. If your goal was to make the track team, you can go ahead and go. The time has passed. You've made it. Congratulations. I'll shake your hand on the way out. But don't expect me to let you hang around here and take reps from other people if you don't have a goal. So right now, whatever event you've made it in, come up with a goal. Because if there's not one, this is going to be real hard. Whether you're going to be training on the track or whether you're going to be lifting, whether you're going to be throwing, whether you're pole vaulting, whatever it is, if you don't have a goal, there is no point in you continuing on. So come up with one right now. If you need help with one, talk to your coach and they'll give you some expectations. But reality is if you don't buy into yourself, now what? We're all in trouble. And I've been quoted in graduation speeches, by valedictorians. And I think that is, I've had those kids before where they get the track scholarship to college. And their performance, it's like, whoa. Your season's not over. You got the scholarship in April. We still have the state championship. I know, but I'm having a hard time staying motivated because my goal for the last 2 years was to get this scholarship. Well, you got it, but they can take it away. What do you mean they can take it away? Well, I mean, if you don't perform the way they expect you to, they can take it and offer it to somebody else. They can? Yeah. So you better come up with that goal again. Now what? So that now what is a big thing. And then no matter what you do, no matter who you are, if you don't have a goal, then you're done. Whatever it is you're doing, you're done with it. And I think that's where I was with the pro level. I was like, okay, I got here. I've thrown in, this big Southeast games I threw in, and I wasn't going to get to that next level without, one, hurting myself, or two, cheating, which I wasn't about to ever do. And so for me, it was, okay, well, now what? And you're in that age group where maybe you should start to try and lose that weight, and kind of see where you're at. And so that's why, because I could have, to be honest with you, I probably could have kept those pro games I had for the next 7 years. And I say 7 just because, I was 43, so until I was about 50, I probably could have kept them without, dropping that 250 and just competing at those levels. Because the thing about our American way of system, if you will, is once you get a games, you probably are keeping it. There's very few games that have turnover, unless you're at those top level games. And so I would have been that guy who's bottom feeder forever. And that's not who I am. So if I don't have a goal, move on to something else. And I didn't anticipate doing lightweight, but then when I got there, it's like, okay, well now let's see if I can get that. And now I want to get this record, and now I want to try and qualify for this games and, do that. So for me, the now what was, okay, what are the lightweight levels? And I wasn't there. Those first couple of games, I was like, oof, no, maybe the Braemar. I got a pretty good Braemar. Maybe I can do that one. And then it was like, well, that heavyweight's doable and that lightweight's doable. And now I think I can maybe get the weight over bar, and okay, well, might as well try and get that sheaf record while you're there. It's only 2 feet away, like, now what? Now what? I think that's who I project to my athletes, and I hope that they continue to do. And right now, the group I have right now are my studs are sophomores. I'm very lucky right now. My top level kids are all sophomores. I got some good seniors. Don't get me wrong. I got some good juniors, but my slam dunk kids, if you will, at that state level are all sophomores. And we're dropping from 4A to 3A next year, classification wise. And I told my kids, I was like, hey, that's what we should be shooting for, is next year we have a group of guys that go to state meet, and now we're in the top 10. And I'm in a place where it has not won a state championship in any sport since the 1940s. So it's like, hey, that could be a goal where we become that first team to win a state championship since 1940s. Come on, guys, let's do this. So that's our now what right now, is trying to put together a team for the future. So
that's a big one.
Nope.
I love that. I think not just having a goal that kind of ends, but what's the next stage after that? I think that's huge. And especially like high school, if kids are considering college and what's beyond that, don't have something that's just going to end when you get there and then just try to meet the bare minimum. No,
yep.
You don't want that, because you're not dead after that point, and there's a lot more athletic career in you if you choose there to be. There's a lot more that you want to do in the rest of your life, like professional career and your relationships and everything. So you definitely
and everything that you and I do, like for track, obviously, guys, there's road races out there. There's masters divisions. There's all sorts of stuff you can do track wise. I've had kids that, graduated from my program and were good kids, never went to a 4-year college, who actually gone to the Olympic trials because they kept training. But they never went to the big 4-year colleges. They went to junior college and then ran some club track meets and found their way to the right beat, the right time, and had their body peak. And like for you, yeah, they might not be able to play the sport that they're playing into their 30s, but the weight room is still something you can take with you. There's a reason why gyms across America exist, is because people want to still lift weights and train. Maybe they didn't want to get stronger for athletics, but just training. For me, I think that even if I wasn't throwing anymore, no, it's not if I wasn't throwing anymore, my gym is something I'm going to still keep. I'm still going to go down to the weight room. I'm still going to squat. I'm still going. Now, maybe I don't do the same type of workouts, and maybe I don't punish myself, with deadlifts at, because I'm a crazy person, and I get up at 3:30 in the morning and work out from 4 to 6. But the gym is literally 300 meters from where I'm sitting right now on my property. So I'm lucky enough that I have that. But there's no way I would be doing that if I didn't have the goal of that next thing that I want to to take care of. And, but we had that luxury. And I tell kids that all the time is like, this doesn't have to stop. Yeah. Okay. The 4x1 has to stop. Okay. Maybe the shot put isn't something that you can keep doing, but track and cross country have those advantages of there's a road race every weekend in America somewhere. There's a weight room in every town in America. So you can continue to be an athlete of some way, shape, or form. And so it doesn't have to end with college. I'd be interested in having a conversation with some of the high level track coaches on what they actually look for when they're recruiting those kids. Because I'm wondering how many of those turn out like the ones what we were just talking about there. It's like, well, I got my scholarship and now, like I'm good. That's all I cared about. I wonder how often that happens versus I got a scholarship. Man, I got to work even harder because, and this was me. Everybody on this team was a state champion. Everybody on this team was the number one guy at their school. Everybody on this team. And when you start to get to the college track level, you get weird stuff like my first track meet I went to, I threw against the the national team from Greece. Like, what? Like, what are they doing at this meet? So it's like, okay, these 8 spots are theirs. And then there's like these collegiate guys, I threw against, guys who were on, Olympic level. And then there's the college guys in the next heat, so you better step it up. You can't go to that track meet or next level and think, I got this, I'm good. Because you don't, and you're not. You're in some trouble. So I'm wondering what that would be, that conversation would be like. What are you like when you have that conversation with that kid? What are you getting out of it? Like, what are they saying that says, okay, this is a guy who's already got this time, but he wants to be here for sure, not the talk. We all know the talk. Like, I've had the kids who have it, like, well, I'm going to miss this year, and this year, and you're like, no, you're not. You haven't been to a single optional practice. You haven't been to a single conditioning day. We know it. But how do you have that conversation with that kid and know they're going to get there? I'd be interested to know that one.
Yeah, I would be too, just because it's so interesting. The type of conversation you have as a coach, like recruiting an athlete or as an athlete trying to be recruited, you're definitely trying to put your best foot forward. Yeah. And at the same time, you're trying to ask probing questions because as a coach, you're bringing someone into like your environment, your culture, your livelihood. And
100%.
as an athlete, you're trying to show that you want to be a part of it, but at the same time, you're kind of putting feelers out because you want to find the best fit for you as well. Mm-hmm. So, it's a tricky game because, I see attrition. Obviously, I don't really play a big role in the recruiting side because all I do is kind of, hey, this is what we do. This is how we're tied in with the coaches. This is how I pitch it. But I really don't get like a yay or nay with, hey, this kid's good, because at the end of the day, like they're there to play that sport. So my opinion really doesn't matter for shit.
Yeah.
Unless like maybe they're tied with 2 kids that equal talent level and they're like, all right, well, what do you think? Like where do they actually stand athletically? And it's like, I still don't get that very often, if at all. So it'd be very interesting to see, like, are there any telltale signs of like some attitude or like progression that they've done at junior year to senior year?
Yeah.
And how much in communication are they over the summer with like their strength coach or with their sport coach? Are they like eager to like get going? Do they come to volunteer trips? Do they go to games like before they're even part of a team? I don't know. That'd be super interesting to kind of see what that progress.
Yeah, because so much. As you understand this more than I do, but like the guys who are friends with who are college coaches, it's like your job depends on you're selecting the right athletes to come to your school and continue to build your program. Or if you whiff, especially with tracks, a lot of track programs aren't fully funded, so you land up with a lot of money invested in a kid who doesn't make it through first semester, or who doesn't, want to come to the training, and you're like, I got to cut your scholarship, and we'll try and give it to some junior college kids who are doing their thing in the midpoint of the year or something. To me, that is such a crazy, because there's those coaches who are really successful at that top level. They must have some checklist that we don't know about, that'd be interesting to know about, because I can tell you, I've seen it on my level where it's like, man, all the talent in the world from a perspective of times and numbers hit in high school. But as soon as you sign on that dotted line, it was like, I'm good, and I respect that in some ways where it's like, hey, I don't need to push myself so I don't get hurt. but then when they go to the next level and they don't try there either, okay, there was more to it than that.
Right.
So I'd be interested in knowing that,
Oh, there's so many factors too. Like even when you go location, if you're being far away from home, like friends, family, like just big life changes, not having your major or kind of changing career thoughts or changing your major. There's so many different things that kind of factor in that kind of fall out of the scope of athletics too, that cause a kid to
100%.
get burned out from the sport or not like the coach or not playing.
Well, how many times are kids in high school, they're not one sport athletes, they're 3-sport athletes, and now you're one goal, one sport. The girl on my team right now, who's our top girl sprinter, she's, volleyball, basketball, track. And it's like, you're just a track athlete at the college level. Can you handle doing track training for, 365? Or do you need that mental break of volleyball, which is a lot different wear and tear on your body, or, basketball, which is different wear and tear on your body? I think that would be interesting to know that attrition rate too. Like how many kids are, because obviously football is the one where, that's where the kids get their most training in at the high school level for not a full year in some instances, because they do maybe play basketball, they do maybe do track, but I've got those kids who are, I'm a football player, that's all I do. Okay, well, that's fine. I'm not going to fight you on that, but if you don't make it to the show, then what? But they're the only ones who get that year long of football weightlifting and year long of sprint training and year long of this and year long of that, whereas everybody else is like, maybe baseball players, I guess maybe baseball players, because they go through like their spring ball and fall ball, winter ball, summer ball, or season ball.
Oh man, yeah, it's a lot. I don't know. I've had a few. I want to say probably only have a handful of dual sport athletes like in my college coaching career.
Yeah.
So at some point it all narrows down, and I don't know when that point comes, if you're getting better offers or you're kind of making your own decision about where you actually want to go and what sports you want to play. But the downtime between those sports is so crucial, I think, just because the level of competition and travel and being away from home, classes, all those sort of things. I think those get added to the mix, like versus high school when like your parents are driving you to school, like you're playing sports, you have a break between. Like your developmental level changes, like the skill level changes when you get to college, that I don't think most kids can handle it. Like playing 2 sports, even if it is what you want to do. But if it's what you want to do, then probably go to a place where it's a lower level, like the expectations are lower. So you can play both. And at that point, you're looking for something that's more pleasurable than like skill, like competition level high.
Yeah.
So we could go on for this forever, but we're gonna have to save it for another Highland Games. Hopefully we got a new one coming up. So but like any good training session, and I know getting down in body weight, you had to do this a little bit. We finished the show with a finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and 1 good one for overtime. So
okay,
go rapid fire, or you could take your time on each question. But you ready?
I am ready.
All right, first one, biggest influence in coaching in general and favorite thrower of all time.
Okay, well, the biggest influence on coaching, it's got to be 2 of them. And you've heard me mention them throughout our conversation. The first one was my high school track coach, strength coach, and he is still at my alma mater, and he still writes my programs, Mike Enteman. Just a phenomenal human being, but also, he's a Poliquin guy, loves, balancing muscle groups, and has kept me, I think, healthy and strong for 21 plus years. You go all the way back to high school. So let's go ahead and say whenever I graduated, so let's go 95, since 1995, kept me strong and athletic. And he taught me pretty much everything when I talk about what I offer to kids. And the other one was Dave Ryerson, who taught me all I need to know about distance. And also the passion that I have for the sport. He is definitely someone who gave me that, from hours long bus rides home, debating, athletes, to workouts, to, somebody, even my approach with kids. I mean, he is just a phenomenal human being. And I've been lucky enough that those 2 men have had a tremendous influence on my life. As for my favorite thrower of all time, all right, well, that's another one where I could do two. And I say that because, Brian Oldfield is definitely an athlete who threw. And he also did the Highland Games. So, we got that going on. But I never was a spinner. So I can't really put him in that category. But, John Godina, who was, the two tapes that I bought in high school, in case you couldn't tell that, John Godina was probably one, because he did both at the Olympic level, shot and disc. And to me, that would be I couldn't be just one. Like, you couldn't just bring me in to be a shot putter. I couldn't do that. Like, I need to throw everything. And that's why I dabbled in the decathlon. I needed more stimuli. And that's why the Highland Games is perfect for me, because I can move on to the next event. So those are my two throwers and my two coaches.
Hey, so when you're not coaching or competing, what are some of your go-to hobbies outside of strength training work?
I have 3 Rhodesian Ridgebacks, which are my lion hunting dogs, which is part of the reason why I moved to the country, because those girls and boys like to run and play. And so hiking with them is a big hobby for me. But like I mentioned before, I'm a workaholic. So I joke all the time that yard work is my favorite hobby. And it's true. I mean, I really do. I like cutting down trees and carrying logs and splitting wood and, cutting grass and weed eating and mowing and whatever else. I mean, this place that I purchased was 100% right up my alley. So I am a enthusiast when it comes to work. So yeah, if those are my two big time sucks, which is fine. And they're different from throwing. They're different from, coaching. And usually they're done with a podcast in my ears, which is, how I like to learn. So
there you go. Well, hopefully the strength game becomes another one for your ears.
There you go.
Hey, so if you could go pro in any sport outside of throwing, like track and field or Highland Games, if you could go back and do it again, what sport would you try to go pro in?
Hands down. I spent my entire youth playing baseball. Loved baseball, still love baseball. I love watching football, NFL like everybody else, college football like everybody else. But let me tell you, baseball season, I am hopefully this season, I am a huge Mets fan. So I grew up watching Mike Piazza and Todd Hundley because I was a catcher in baseball. And so that would be definitely where I'd want to go pro. And of course, I was listening to one of your podcasts previously, and got a little insight into the thought of what it takes to travel for 162 games and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, maybe I wouldn't want to go pro in that one, but throw that all aside. Professionally, it would be very awesome to have been a baseball player.
Awesome.
Definitely.
I think it's a little different playing 162 versus traveling and being in coaching 162.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Hey, so setting up an ideal training day for you. You already told us your wake up time for morning lifts, but what is usually your go-to music or PR song, and what does your post-training meal look like on those good days?
All right. So music is, and I tell kids this all the time, whatever invokes emotion. So if it's, I'll listen to a podcast during my workout because a lot of times I'm just, doing volume work. But if I've got to hit a big rep or I've got to hit a big heavy set, or like now, I joked before. I didn't say joked before. I said before that I'm not a huge weight room. Like I'm trying to PR in the weight room. I got to throw blah, blah, blah. I mean, you still have those numbers in your head. So I'm still sort of working my way towards that mythical, 2-time body weights, squat and, 2.5 time deadlift and, kind of working my way towards all those mythical numbers. So if I got to hit that big mark, something's got to be heavy. So it could be any genre. I could care less. It's just got to be fast and heavy. I grew up on Metallica. So, Metallica is always good. Doesn't matter what it is. But I mean, it really just depends on the week, the month, year, whatever. Right now, it's actually some mashups that they do. Some different songs, but I like some of the stuff that they're doing right now in mashups. So probably a mashup of some kind, but it would definitely be like heavy rock, hard rock. So I can't pick one particular song. Sorry, because what works this week might not work next week. What was the second part of that question? Post meal, right?
Yeah, meal.
I'm pretty easy, man. Just give me some, beef on the grill. I probably eat steak more than most people. I'm I'm borderline carnivore. You already heard me say peanut butter and dairy. I am definitely a steak a lot of times. But since I work out in the morning, most of the time it's a protein shake and some eggs and then head off to work. But like today, I lifted a little later because it's spring break, and I got to have a steak around 10 o'clock in the morning right before my track practice. So definitely a steak.
What a breakfast. Hey, so last one I got for you for overtime. What Highland Games or country or state is on your bucket list that you want to throw at? What's your number one on the bucket list that you want to throw at?
Well, okay. Well, I've thrown in Scotland, which was definitely at the top of the list. Period. The end. I mean, like if you're not throwing in Scotland as a Highland Games athlete, I don't know. Like there's being where it was created, that kind of thing. So obviously, if I could throw any games, it would be back in Scotland, for sure. But right now my target is throwing at lightweight nationals and worlds, and that's where I'd like to be. I have no idea how this works because I understand the pro model in America, but I do not understand the algorithms and everything else that goes into lightweight Highland Games rankings. I'm not gonna even pretend like I know. So maybe I'll get ranked high enough to get invited to nationals. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Right now on NASGA, I'm number one, but what does that mean? I don't know. Don't know. So hopefully I get invited to that and get a chance to throw against the young guys because, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. There's definitely no rhyme or reason to lightweights. I still don't understand. And I don't want to try to get on that stupid Facebook group and try to figure it out. And so if they want to block me from it, go for it. I don't really care.
Well, like last year, I think I was ranked 7th on NASGA, which if you don't know NASGA, that's our ranking board. And I was ranked 18th somehow on the lightweight board. And I was like, okay, then I'm not going. No big deal. Okay, cool. And I got about my business and went on my life. And then a week before the games, they were like, hey, do you want in? And I'm like, I'm 18th. What do I need? I'm not making plans to fly somewhere the week before. Sorry, I'm good. So maybe next year. And I hope that I get invited. And if I don't, I'll focus on what I can do. So, it is what it is.
Well, hopefully we both get to go if I can get my numbers up a little bit. I mean, the only thing I'm ever good at is hammer. So I'm the invert of you.
Yeah, we're put together. We make a very good thrower.
I'd rather be good at 7 out of 9 than 2 out of 9 though. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
But hopefully we get one of those. Hopefully we get to throw again. We'll definitely look for some more games up in your area and in the Carolinas and Georgia as well. But hey, for anybody that's got any questions about track and field, Highland Games, throwing, balancing, all those things, where can people get a hold of you or kind of follow along like your competition history and everything?
I mean, I'm kind of like we already know I'm old. I keep pointing that out, and you keep pointing that out, and my 7th graders point that out all the time. Let me tell you, I am Creek Falcon on Instagram, and so that's probably the best thing you can do for me right now. And I'll just leave it at that. They can get a hold of me that way. They can message me on that, or they can reach out that way. So
awesome. Hey, well, Shane, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Obviously, I don't want to take up too much of your time because it is.
Hey, it's spring break.
I know, but I know you got a lot of yard work to do. You got to walk the dogs and everything. You already got your throwing and training in for today. So I can't thank you enough for coming on today, man. And hopefully we'll definitely keep in touch so we can throw together again soon.
100%.
Awesome, man. Well, take care.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.